Okay, so I hope you all enjoyed that. There were some interesting comments on Twitch. Yes, I guess throwing things is a thing this year. Anyway, we now have Jim, Adam, and Kevin to give you a brief little overview of what's going on and to answer your questions. Thank you very much, everyone who attended our kickoff today, and we hope to see you at events.
Hello, welcome to the 2020-2021 season. This is your field here. I'll walk you through the how to set up a little discussion of the field and autonomous, and then Adam will take you through the driver control end game, and then since he's the lead robot inspector, some words of advice on robot inspection. So as you saw in the video, and we all noticed that they really stepped up the quality of the video this year. It was quite nice. We have goals, we have wobble goals, we have rings. In Minnesota this year, we're going to be doing the half field. We're not doing the traditional. So all our rules that we're going to explain are specifically for the half field. So when you come out to the field, you'll place your robot. Much like the years before, it has to be over a line and touching the back wall, the front wall. So any part of the robot can be over the start line is what that's called. And then it has to be touching the front wall. The next thing you'll do is take one of the wobble goals, and you can either put it on your robot, or at a minimum, it has to be touching your robot. Then you'll have the opportunity to preload up to 3 rings onto your robot. You don't have to, that's optional, but that's your decision. If you choose not to, then the rings will be placed back into the low goal here, but they will not count. For determining your target zone, we're going to have the randomization. Well, for today's demonstration, you roll a 2. That means there will be 1 ring out here. Now your robot can detect that that's a 1 ring. You're going to go to this target square to place your wobble goal to get the placement points. So the robot would take it, come here. Important thing to know about that is that in order for it to score, it has to be completely in the target zone. Much like the years before, make sure you know completely in, outside, on, fully supported, and partially supported. All those definitions are in the rules, and they're very important to know. They're in the front part of game manual too. Other things about the field, we have target zones. We have target zone 1, 2, 3. If the die roll is a 1 or a 4, that'll indicate you need to put it in target zone 1. 2 and 5, target zone 2. 3 and 6 get you into target zone 3. Coming down to this end of the field, we have the tower goal. We have the low, medium, and high. Like they said in the video, you can come up and you can put the rings in once you're in this zone. But if you're going to attempt to put a ring in the high goal or the medium goal, you have to be on this side of the white line, the front face of the white line. If you come over here and throw it in, then that'll be a penalty. On the red field to the left of the tower goal are the power shots. When the game starts, they'll be forward, and you can hit them, and they'll go back. Once again, much like the medium and the high goals, you have to be on this side. You have to be in the launch zone, is how it's technically worded. You can knock them up in either any order you want, and you get the points. For parking, or what do they call navigating, the robot just has to be partially over the start line. Now it can be right like this too. not this, I misspoke, this start line, the launch line. It can be like this, where it's only over the red portion here, but think of the launch line being continuous. It's even counts if it's underneath the red tape there. And when you start autonomous, it'll be much like in a traditional match. The whoever your, I forget that there's an official, your field manager, or whoever's filling the portion of being the head ref, will come out and say, "Is everybody ready?" And you'll say yes. You'll get your robot placed in the proper position. You'll select your autonomous, and then you'll set your controllers aside. They'll randomize the field. Remember, 0 rings is position 1, 1 ring is position 2, and 4 rings will be position 3. Once that's done, they'll go, "Is everybody ready?" 3, 2, 1, go. You hit the start, or you can hit initialize and start if you want, or you don't even have to run autonomous. Your robot will run for 30 seconds. You'll stop. Then you'll hear the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then 3, 2, 1 to go. And you'll pick up your controllers, and then you'll start the driver control. And Adam will take you through the driver control in endgame.
All right, I'll get this out of here. Alrighty, so the driver control portion is mostly where you are shooting rings or depositing rings into the tower goal. So if you were shooting rings, you can shoot in any of the 3, but if you are launching rings, the more proper term, you have to be, again, within the launch zone. However, you do not need to shoot rings to score them. You can also deposit them in the low goal, but only the low goal if you're depositing them. You can't deposit in this area into the medium or high zone. So the teleop is, or driver control period, is mostly controlling the rings. The human player is the one responsible for bringing the rings back onto the field. You have to use the chutes, and the human player must return the rings as soon as reasonably possible back to the field. And sometimes they will get stuck. That's okay. And that's how the rings are deposited back onto the field. As you can see, perhaps there's different strategies on how you return them to the field via the chute, so they may roll, they may not. However, one rule this year is you can't sit beneath the return chutes and collect them to score right back in. They have to touch the ground before you can attempt to rescore them. Another thing the human player can do is, if any of the power shots are scored in autonomous, they can use the return device to bring them forward again. This must be done before the start of endgame. There is a little bit of a grace period, but human players should reset these as soon as they can if they have been scored. And as Jim mentioned, at the start of the game, you must preload one of the wobble goals, whether it's touching or on your robots. During Teleop, these do not count for any points until the end game. So if you want to carry them through the driver control period, you can, but you don't have to. However, to utilize them in the end game, they must be located in one of the target zones or not in the launch zone. So they have to be essentially on this side of the field or in one of the target zones. And when end game starts, whether you're carrying the wobble goal or you pick them up later, that is when you can bring them to the launch zone, stack rings or not, and then deposit them into the drop zone, which is about a foot wide, I believe. And then also at the end game, you can again shoot the power shots with rings and continue to score rings in any of the goals. And have I missed any obvious scoring opportunities? I don't think so. So we can talk quickly about robot inspection. The robot rules in part 1 of the manual are very similar to last year. However, the few big exceptions are the modern core robotic modules, the servo module. All that stuff is now considered illegal parts. You have to be on the rev control system. Other key things are there are very few approved batteries. First, we'll only accept the batteries that they specifically list in the manual. You obviously need to have a separate on and off switch. So the rev switch, and they also define acceptable switches. You must have one of those. Otherwise, the other rules are very similar to previous years. You have to be within an 18-inch cube. You can extend afterwards out of that zone. have to weigh under 42 pounds. And I believe those were the primary things. So I think we can start getting to questions now. So you can submit those via chat, Twitch chat. Awesome. Thank you.
So a couple questions we have here around launching and what you need to do to be able to launch. You need to be completely inside the
You were muted.
Sorry about that, everyone. A couple questions came in about launching and where you have to be able to launch. You have to be completely in the launch zone, which is the portion of the field that faces the audience. And to be completely in, if you look here at the robot, you can be on the white line, but you have to be behind this edge of the white tape to be considered in the launch zone. So that right there would be considered not completely in the launch zone, and you'd be penalized for launching and scoring. Next question came in around the rings to be placed on the Wobble Goals. You can only place rings on the Wobble Goals in endgame. You cannot do that before endgame starts. Another Wobble Goal question, can one robot move both Wobble Goals? One robot can score both Wobble Goals, but you cannot have possession of both Wobble Goals at the same time. So you can only possess one Wobble Goal at a time, but you could go score it and then go back, get the other one, and then score it. Question on the power goals. Do the power goals have to be knocked over by a ring, or can they be knocked over by a robot manipulator? They do need to be knocked over by a ring. So you have to be able to launch a ring and hit the power goal like that and score it. Since we have a half field, do we need to have walls all around? I would say read the field setup guide for this. I think it's going to be up to you how you set your fields up, and if you need the other half of field walls. You will need the ability to be able to support the power goals over here. As you can see, this is zip tied to this wall, so you at least will probably have to have the full back wall. Yes, and the front wall needs to be here so that you have a height barrier to be able to drop the Wobble Goal outside the front. So you'll need that there.
You done with your questions?
So the next question is around the middle goal, and if we will have a middle goal this year. Yes, so as you take a look at the rules for the remote game, the rules are slightly different for scoring a remote game versus the full game. So even though this is blue for the remote game, this will still be your middle goal, and you'll be able to score in there.
Okay, we have some more. They're coming in fast and furious. Oh. Okay, so one of the questions we had during endgame, can you move the Wobble Goal thing with rings on it? You can. Yes, you can. You can only score the rings onto the Wobble Goal during endgame, and you certainly can move it about the field during endgame with rings on it. What happens if you get a ring on the flippy goals? On the power shots, I don't know of anything in the rules that says we can do it. You don't get any points for that, that's sure. If it happens to knock it back, as Adam's showing there, that's going to count. Yeah, that's what I would say. You could probably, the human player can pull it off. Is there a rule for launching such as height or force? In the robot rules in Manual 1, there is the, 14 feet, and there's rules about that. You want to speak to that, Adam?
Sure, I believe the max launch distance is about 16 feet, and the max height is about 6. However, you know, if you're shooting 6 feet high, you're definitely missing the high goal, so aim low if you can. Your human player will appreciate it.
So the next question we have is, do you get extra points for having rings on the wobble goal when you place the wobble goal outside the field? Yes, you do. The number of rings that you have will count in endgame, but remember, you can only place those rings on the wobble goals during endgame. Next question is around the power goals, and can power goals be reset during Teleop if they all get knocked down, or do they only reset at the start of Teleop? They can be reset prior to the endgame starting. So can we score red rings into the blue goal? So again, on our remote setup here where we have half a field like we've got set up here in front of you, that blue middle goal is going to be scored as a red goal point for you, your teams. If we get to a point during the season where we're in a full field, that will be a blue goal, and that will score for the other team. How squishy are the rings? You want to show them how squishy the rings are, Adam? So they're kind of squishy. They're not foam. I would say they're kind of a hardish foam. They've got some ability to move, but not just like a sponge or anything like that.
Jeannie says don't let your dog get them.
Yes, keep your dogs away from them, says Jeannie. Can you put both wobble goals outside and get points? Yes, you can. But remember, you can only possess one at a time, so you would have to actually put one outside the goal, go back and get the second one, and put that outside the field. Someone asked a comment or put a comment about ring return and asking about, will it get messy if you don't have a full field or at least a wall on that side? So you're going to have both back wall sections, I think, just so that you can support the power end. But ring return will probably get messy if you think about it, because rings are probably, at least initially during the year, going to go everywhere. So you're just going to have to keep an eye on that and make sure that you're collecting your rings and trying to get them back into the field as quickly as possible. There is a rule in the rules around returning the rings back to the field in a timely manner. It's not defined as what timely means, but the purpose of the rule is to prevent teams from hoarding rings. So the whole concept here is the more rings that are in the field, the more opportunities you have to score. And when we're in a remote environment like this, it's your advantage to get all the rings back in the field. The rule around getting them back quickly for a full field is so that teams don't hoard rings and keep the other team from scoring. Could you use a spatula on your robot? Well, a spatula is something you can buy in the store. I guess I don't see anything wrong about that. Adam, any of your thoughts?
As long as it's a commercial off-the-shelf part, it would be legal. However, there would be big concerns for tipping other robots.
Correct. So one of the last parts of the video they showed was around tipping over other robots. You certainly can't do that with it. But if you wanted to use that to launch something, again, as long as you buy it off the shelf, it's an off-the-shelf product, so it would be legal.
There's a special request.
Can you show a ring thrown like a frisbee, please?
Go ahead.
All right, Cheryl's going to be demonstrating our ring throws as a frisbee. She almost got him in. Now from a little lower angle. There we go. We at least got one in the middle goal for you. If the rings go outside the field perimeter, can they be added back by the human player? If they go outside the field perimeter out the back, yes. If they go out the sides where the teams are, I don't believe those are allowed to be put back in. Is that correct, Jim? By the teams. Field personnel would have to do that. Yeah, so whoever's your field manager or whoever's your referee would be allowed to do that, but the team themselves would not be allowed to pick up the ring that goes outside by the driver stations or outside the front. But again, if they go outside the back, the human player is allowed to do that. Can you score in the top boxes from the far side of the field via launching? So yes, the top and middle, the only way you can score in those is from the in essence, what is the portion of the field that's facing the audience. So it's back by the start line and back by the drop zone where you would place the wobble goals. So that's the only where you can score into those two boxes. Can you place rings on the wobble goals once the wobble goal is outside the field? No, you cannot. Let's see.
As long as we're discussing rings, as long as we're discussing putting rings on the wobble goal, the rings have to be fully supported. So that is fully supported. If your wobble goal tips over and it's outside, or if it's inside the field and wobble goal tips over, your ring no longer counts because it's partially supported by the floor. We can go like this, and if you can imagine, there, that would count. Good luck trying to do that, but just remember that the rings have to be fully supported. That counts. That counts.
So
That
can
last
robot
one does
move
not count.
both wobble goals?
All right, back to a couple other questions here. Can one robot move both wobble goals? Yes, but not at the same time. Is there a total number of rings per team? So there are 10 rings allowed per team. So in the half field setup, you will have 10 rings. In a full field setup, there'll be 20 rings. Can we set up a 2/3 field like you have there? Yes, you can.
This is what's defined in the setup guide for remote things.
Okay.
Essentially a 2/3 field.
So Norm just said this is what's actually defined in the setup guide as a 2/3 field. So yes, this is something you could set up. Can the human player push the rings back into the field if they get stuck on the ring return system? So there is a portion of the rule in the full field, or in a full event, that references a tournament-provided tool that can be used to push the ring down there. And right now, there is nothing specifically preventing a human player from pushing that ring out or pulling that ring out. So until there is a specific rule, I think right now our indication is we're going to allow that to occur. Once we get into a full fields situation, it says there is a tournament-provided tool that the human player could use for that. Can arms or other robots move over the launching zone when launching the ring? So the way the rule is written is there cannot be an inconsequential extension outside the launching zone. So if you extend your arm outside the launching zone when you're launching a ring, you're actually gaining an advantage because you're getting a little bit closer to the goals than you would if you were completely behind. So that would be considered a penalty.
I don't know if you want to do that or go this way.
So another question came in around the needs for a full floor and what if teams have to share with another team or don't have room for a full field. So teams that have to share with another team, there's nothing wrong with having a full field and using a full field, but only playing on a portion of the field. So that certainly can be done. If you don't have room for a full field, I think that's something that you'll want to take a look at the game setup rules and decide. I think there are some options in there for that, just to understand. And think about reaching out to some other teams that maybe have access to a field and partnering with them to see if you can use their field to have your matches.
I think that question is actually asking, do you need 2/3? If two teams have a full field, can they split it exactly in half and have half at each site?
Okay, so Norm's got a slightly different interpretation on that question than I did around if you need to have a 2/3 field or have one field be split into two. You can certainly still split one field into two, but the remote rules are you only compete one at a time.
If you split it into two, there's only 4 walls, so you'll be missing one of your walls if you're thinking about two.
Yeah, because you're one panel short
Yeah.
from a width perspective.
Yeah.
So controlling rings near the ring return is likely to be a strategy. Has there been any guidance yet on how far a ring must travel along the floor before a robot may pick it up? It needs to make contact with the floor. But there's no distance or anything like that. There is no time period for how long it needs to be on the floor. So as for right now, that's kind of what the guidance is. Do the rings have to be on the pole of the wobble goal for it to count? No. As you can take a look at the what Vicky will be looking at there, it does not have to be on the pole, but it needs to be fully supported, which means it cannot be touching the field. So in the particular view that we've got right now, there are 4 rings there, but only 3 of them would score because only the one that's on the pole, the 2 resting against the pole would count. The one resting on the floor would not count. Is there a limit to how fast the rings can be thrown? There is not a limit to, there's not a speed limit per se, but you are limited to how many rings you can have in your possession at one time, and that limit is 3. Can you still be in contact with the wobble goal at the end of autonomous? No, you may not, just like in other years. There's a question here about do we need to wear masks at the competitions. We're going to leave that up to your field personnel at the competition to determine how they want you to wear masks. There's no specific rules around that right now, at least for the remote events.
And that's it so far.
And those are all the questions we have so far. Feel free to provide any more questions, and I'll turn it back over to Jim and Adam and see if they've got any other comments.
Sure, I can say one thing about penalties quick. So for the remote events, the half competitions, if you will, penalties are deducted from your score. If it were a full traditional tournament, then the penalties would add to the other alliance's score.
I'll talk around the rings and the tower goal. Let's say one somehow gets stuck here, and the human player wants to get it out. What they have to make sure is the robot is 1 tile away from the tower goal before they reach in and grab the ring out of the tower. That's for personnel safety. Another thing, just be careful of reaching in when you're the human player.
What's the point of the pictures in the wall?
Sure, what's the point of the pictures in the wall? As Adam's pointing to there, those are navigation pictures. Each one of the pictures has a different picture on it. So they'll always be in the same location. So you're part of your robot programming, you can recognize, hey, the picture with the hands is on the front field. The picture with the, looks like a messy locker room is on the driver's side. The picture of the happy, smiling FTC kids is on the back wall. So they're for aids in navigation.
A question is to how to show or can you show the team goals?
Can you show the...
Get a little closer to the goals. Just show them.
By the team goals, we're assuming you mean the tower goal and the power shots.
It's hard because they're all black.
Yeah. With this, give some perspective. You've got probably, for the low goal, you probably have 1.5 rings. And what are the rings? 5 inches, something like that. So probably about 7 inches. That looks to be about 2 rings, so maybe 10 inches. And then that one's just a little bit more than 1 ring. So that's going to be about 5. And they are probably 2 feet wide. They're about the width of a field tile.
When placing wobble goals in autonomous, can the goals be on the line?
So for placing wobble goals, they can be on the line, but they have to be completely in. So if I place this at the very corner where it's just within the tape, that'll work. But if it's outside or not completely in, then that will not count for autonomous points. So completely in, still completely in with the tape, not completely in.
Can you compete using a full field?
In remote, no.
If you knock over multiple power goals with one ring, do they all count?
They will count if you're lucky to hit 2 or even 3 at a time. Good work.
I don't know if you were turned on when you answered that. Repeat the question.
Sure, so the question was, can you score more than 1 power shots with a single ring? Yes. So if it bounces off and hits, say, these 2, then you get the points for both. But you only get the points in autonomous and endgame.
Are there points for putting a wobble goal in any target zone at all? Or do you have to put it in the correct target zone?
Are there points for putting it, the wobble goal, in any of the target zones? You only get the points for the target zone that was randomized. So once again, if you have no rings after randomization, then you'll go into target zone 1. If you have 1 ring after randomization, you'll go to target zone 2, where it is now. And if there's 4, you'll go to target zone 3. If, for example, your randomization was target zone 3 and you placed it in target zone 2, even though it's completely in, it's perfectly okay, you will not get any points.
About how much do wobble goals weigh? They weigh about that much, the told us.
How much?
Less than a can of peas. How about a can of poppers, wouldn't you say? 12 ounces?
Pounds, maybe 2.
I don't know.
I can look that up.
Where are your cookies? Anyway.
There's a question about how many different functions are you able to have on your robot. I guess I'm not totally sure what that means. There's a question about how many functions you're allowed to have on your robot. I guess I'm not completely sure what that means. You can build your robot to do many different things. So you can build it to be able to pick up the wobble goals, to be able to launch, to be able to do a variety of things in the game. There's no limitations around that. Adam?
Yes, and to expand on that a little bit, you can design your robot to do everything in the game, but there are robot limits, such as you can only have 8 DC motors, only 12 servos. It has to fit within the 18 by 18 by 18 inch cube. But if you can make everything fit within that cube, then you can play as much as you want.
Can you launch more than 1 ring at a time?
Question about can you launch more than 1 ring at a time? You are able to do that, but remember again, you can only have 3 rings in your possession at any one time.
And while it's in the air, it still counts as being in your possession.
Correct. It has to actually come to a complete landing before you actually are able to launch again.
I just have to figure out how to answer that one. You don't have to do that one.
How much does it take to knock over a wobble goal? We'll kind of. Okay, we'll give you. We'll try this here. I'm just going to gently tap it. So it does move a little bit, but to knock it over, you've got to use a pretty good force to actually get it to stay tipped over.
When you say you got to move it well past 45.
Yeah.
There was a question about filming requirements. For FTC, there are no filming requirements. You run your matches and you submit your scores via the app or via paper method as described earlier. But there are no filming requirements. We're hoping that you film your team running robot matches so we can watch them all, but that's just an overview of the field. We're not doing any scoring or confirmation of anything during those matches. That's just for the ability for other teams to watch you.
And as for shooting rings into the goal, if you shoot one into the middle, high, or low goal and it bounces out, you do not get the points for that shot. So it has to end up in the back of the tower goal for it to count. So I'll give it a try here to see if I can get any to bounce.
So is that in?
No, that is not in. It has to be completely in. It is in, but not completely in, so you won't get the score.
Right, so again, scoring has to be completely in. Another question around how far is the white line from the back wall? It's 60 inches.
A review of parking the robot at the end of the game.
Parking the robot at the end of the game?
There's not.
Yeah, there is no parking at the end of the game. So there's no points for parking in a specific location or anything like that.
They're worried about the miles per hour to fling the rings. They're talking about speed. I think you said that they haven't defined that.
Yeah, I know there appears to be some comments around speed or how fast you can fling the rings. There's no definition for that at this point, so wouldn't worry about that too much right now. So one thing to kind of remind everybody about, so obviously there are the rule manuals, and make sure you focus on the remote rule manuals this year for the games in Minnesota. That's the only games we're going to have at this point through the year, so ensure that you're focusing on that. And then the other piece of information that's really, really important around rules is to really spend time in the forums. There are a lot of interpretations that are very similar to kind of the questions and answer sessions we're having right here that are made throughout the year. And those are the final say in any of the rules, so you'll want to keep an eye on that. And that's also a good place to ask additional questions during the year, because the Game Design Committee actually is responsible for answering those questions.
So regarding the launching of the speed that Kevin brought up, if you look in Game Manual 1, section under Robot Rules, there's rule RG08, which covers launching game elements. Just let me read a little bit about it. Launching elements with excessive velocity could create a safety hazard for other teams and field personnel. If the referee feels that a robot is launching scoring elements with excessive velocity, the robot must be re-inspected. Robots must show that a launch scoring element cannot travel in the air more than 16 feet distance or more than 5 feet in elevation.
So you've got distance and height limitations, but no speed limitations.
Which are going to tie in, right? If you're going 70 miles an hour, you're going to go more than...
Yes. Unless you have a way to brake really quickly.
Yeah?
Game manuals will be available on the first site in the FTC section later today.
Yeah, they don't have them out there yet.
And then we'll also post links to them as well. I believe so, yeah. Is the question about the drop zone, is that the entire width of the field? So you don't have there's not like a half of the field. So 2-3 years ago, when we were doing relic recovery, you had to put it on a mat, and there was some definition around where it was. This year, it appears that it's just outside the front edge of the wall. 1 foot, yep.
Yeah, it's just your front boundary.
Yeah, it's just outside your front boundary.
I think this is the 8 seconds, a ton.
Yep, just a reminder, the length between autonomous and Teleop transition is 8 seconds. Yep. No, the timing is all the same as it has been in previous years, so nothing about that has changed.
First put the link up, but it's the wrong one. But I think it's the wrong one. Someone just said wrong link.
Okay, if there are no any other questions, do you guys have anything else you'd like to say?
Talk about the forums.
Yeah, one.
Yeah, I'll just give one more push for the forums again this year. You know, we're talking in Minnesota about some other opportunities that we'll have throughout the year for question and answer sessions and opportunities to, you know, talk to the referees about games and how rulings can be. But the forums are the critical thing to stay focused on. So continue to focus on those. Those typically get answered Thursday afternoon before the weekend. So keep an eye on those and read them because they are very important.
And also, there's 3 forums in there. There's the game questions and answers, and then there's repeated questions, and then there's also I forget the name of them, but the key element is it's not just the one main forum. It's all 3 of them count as being the official rulings. And remember, the forum rulings oversee everything. So they can completely overturn something in Game Manual Part 2, and that's why you got to pay attention to the forums.
You guys done? Okay. All right, I think we're kind of wrapped up with that. Please check out the game manuals according to the chat. It is available on the FIRST website. Remember, please, if you've not registered, to register with FIRST and then register with, and then we will know how many teams we're going to be expecting this season. And teams that have registered, please go on our website and consider opting in for the cohorts, because we'd really like to get teams involved in that and think that will be a great opportunity for this year. So everyone, thanks for coming, and we hope you have a good season. Thanks much.